Good morning. I hope everybody had a wonderful break. I'm going to pick up where we left off from the last time. And even though the final exam and the second quiz will not be cumulative, and again, the second quiz is a pop quiz. It could come at any time. So please make sure that you're ready for that. And stay up to speed with the reading. Go back and review some of the lecture notes. And if there's anything that you need more clarity on, let me know. So the final exam won't be cumulative. It's still going to build off of a lot of the information that we talked about in the first half of the class. So you won't be responsible on the exam for anything that we talked about directly, but the book is written in a way where it's a continuation of the story that began when urban populations first began to develop. So we talked about, for example, again, the reasons why the cities began to develop is human beings were able to get enough resources to develop a surplus in food and other valued resources that allowed them to gather in one place and not stay on the move for their food. We talked about how this really began to accelerate during the Industrial Revolution, where machines began to do more of the work for human beings. And this made it where farming became less lucrative way to try and survive. You were, on the road to starvation if you tried to continue farming. So people would have to go work in factories with the onset of the Industrial Revolution. This led to a lot of people coming in a short amount of time, and this required a degree of urban planning for these cities to try and get things organized and trying to make sure that the surplus was maintained, make sure that people are healthy, safe, etc. Sometimes we talked about this led to some levels of quote unquote fear. We talked about some of the fear and insecurity that is defined, that has characterized many urban centers. And this is often stood in contrast to rural places where you have smaller groups, but a lot more community. All of these discussions are germane to our focus in chapter 11, where we look at urban enclaves and ghettos. And when we talk about, we hear the term ghetto a lot. Don't make me get ghetto. This old ghetto ass mother. Those type of things. But be clear, when we talk about ghetto, it is a very specific sociological term. As always, when you see something written in italics, that's something that you want to familiarize yourself with very closely. As always, do not just try and memorize the definition alone. Try and gain real understanding. So I'll ask you in a few minutes, listen up, young people. I will ask you all in a few minutes to explain for me the differences between a ghetto and an enclave. Do not read for me this word for word definition, okay, young people? Try and, show a solid understanding of what it means. And that understanding will work off of this definition here. So again, one of the biggest considerations that urban planners have to take into account was where are people going to live? So we talked about you have all these people coming in a very short amount of time. People come from Italy, people coming from Poland, people coming from Ireland, Black people coming from Alabama, Mississippi, South Carolina, Georgia, folks coming from the Caribbean, Jamaica, Haiti, Puerto Rico. I mean, so you got like all these people coming. And why are they coming to these big American cities again, young people? Why are they coming?
Jobs.
Anybody?
Opportunity, money.
Nope.
Jobs.
Who said that?
Me, Steven.
One extra credit point, Steven. Yes, jobs. Not just opportunity. That could mean anything. Not an opportunity to be able to purchase some cat litter. We want to be very specific. So yes, Stephen, they were coming for jobs in particular. Opportunity is a very general distinction. But as people came for these jobs, there was going to be a question again of where were they going to live? And this unfortunately settled in as well into some very fine patterns where you begin to have, Deshaun, the development of more ghettos. And please, again, make clear about the definition here. And we'll explain these in depth throughout the chapter. It's a set of neighborhoods that are exclusively, and that word there is important, exclusively inhabited by members of one group within which virtually all members of that group live. Enclaves, conversely, have communities where a high percentage of members of the same group, often of the same cultural and ethnic background, and here's the key word here, Deshaun, voluntarily. So people are choosing to live in an enclave. People end up living in a ghetto. Do y'all understand the difference?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It's really important. Again, you choose to live in an enclave. That you may, again, like, you know, so, and look here, right? A lot of times people hear this term and they'll just think automatically, okay, that the Black areas are ghettos. But no, they're Black enclaves. That if you wanted to, like, you know, if you migrated from South Carolina to New York City in the 1920s, you probably, you know, want to feel, you know, you got some decent money in your pocket. You found a good job up there. You're not just destitute. You could afford to live in many places of the city, but 8 times out of 10, you're going to want to live near some Black folks, particularly back then. So you might move to Harlem. So the Harlem Renaissance, again, you know, during that time was an upperly, a middle-class Black area. You had poor people there, but you had a wide dispersion of, like, you know, types of people. You would have doctors, lawyers, dentists, professional people living in Harlem. It wasn't just, you know, so that at that time, it wasn't a ghetto. So keep this in mind as we go forward. There are Black enclaves. But for the most part, as we'll see, Stephen, most of the ghettos in these urban centers would be populated by people that look like you, and that's not by happenstance. In an enclave, Charles, the neighborhoods are not segregated, and they're often composed of a number of different ethnic groups. It's a number of different ethnic groups. So you might have Italians, you might have Irish, you might have Polish people, you might have Black people, all living in this community. And they gotta, you know, find a way to navigate it. But it's enough, you know, if you're Hispanic, it's enough Puerto Rican people there. And not all Hispanics are Puerto Rican, of course. But there are enough Puerto Rican people there that makes you feel comfortable. Again, you know, oftentimes, Stephen, they talk about, you know, a breakdown of community in cities, but, you know, you all, upon graduation and you go into the job market, you all may have occasion and probably will at some point end up going to a new city that you're not familiar with. I know I've had to do that. And oftentimes one of the things that you'll consider is, okay, how many Black people live in this area? This is the same thing that happens again when people are coming from, moving from China. They want to know, like, hey, are there going to be a nice amount of Chinese people in this area? Will I be able to eat the traditional foods that I'm used to? Will I be able to eat those? I don't know how to speak English yet. Will my language be a barrier in this community, or will I be able to kind of find a way to get, like, my, find my berries, if you will? But those, again, are choices as opposed to ghetto is just people would like to move if they could. Oftentimes, they're not able to afford to. So again, we talk about enclaves, and as we go forward, make sure, Stevie, you keep this definition in your mind the whole time. Keep this definition in your mind. That a lot of white ethnic enclaves began to form in many of the northern cities in the late 1800s and early 1900s. As you take these notes, please pay special attention to some of the concepts written in italics, because that'll be something that you'll need to know for the any upcoming quizzes or the final exam. And if there are any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to let me know. If there's anything, I do get frustrated sometimes when we go over this stuff and it appears like we have not had a conversation at all. But if there are things that you don't understand or that you need me to go back over again or break down a little bit more detail, please stop me in real time, and I'll be more than happy to do that. So if there are any questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. So again, around 1880 and 1924, there was a massive immigration from Eastern and Southern European countries into the United States. And what were they coming for again?
Jobs.
Good, excellent.
Job.
Outstanding. In what historical event happened in the 1800s? I guess the late 1700s, but really got driving in the 1800s. What historical event really spurred people coming to cities in particular for these jobs? What historical event really kind of made people pull people towards these cities?
Was it the Industrial Revolution?
Excellent, Charles. One extra credit point, sir. So when you say here, right, it was a lot of low-paid industrial workers, a lot of low-paid industrial workers. This is really important. Make sure y'all hear me here. Don't just listen to the note, look at the notes. Make sure you hear the discussion. Low-paid industrial work, y'all, is like, unlike the kind of work that you all are going to be doing, it don't really require a lot of skills and knowledge to do it. So like, again, you know, you got people that, quote unquote, are fresh off the boat, coming from Italy, coming from China, coming from Poland. They can't speak a lick of English, but they can hammer, you know, this widget into this gadget and just do that over and over again all day. You don't need a lot of other skill sets to be able to do that. All you really needed was like, you know, usable muscles. However, the work was not the greatest pay. Again, at this point, we're going to have, you know, a lot more social inequality after the Industrial Revolution, because the people that own the machines, Stephen, they had a lot of money. Those machines did cost money, but they would pay the workers, you know, a little bit of money, and the workers were very easily replaceable. Again, at this point, Deshaun, you got people coming like, you know, we talk about fresh off the boat. There's boat after boat after boat after boat after boat after boat coming to America in search of better paying jobs. And in an environment like that, it's easier to find a job, but it's also a lot easier to be replaced. Again, Charles, this is a job that you don't need to have a lot of skills for me to find a replacement for you. So if you tripping, you come in late, we got 1,000 people outside that's unemployed that will replace you. Hell, it's going to be 2,000 people coming on another boat tomorrow if y'all want to trip. So the workers did not have a lot of power in this environment. They also, again, since their resources were really poor, they were forced to live in close places to their work. And to be clear, they're coming here, right? So we talk about the pull. One of the things we're going to talk about throughout are the pull and push factors of cities, the pull and push factors. What are the things that are pulling people to cities and what are pushing them from other places? So they're leaving Europe because, you know, it's a lot of poverty there. It's like, you know, wars and stuff breaking out, terrible genocides. So Europe has, in many ways, at this stage, kind of reached the peak of its development. But America, Stephen, is this new thing. You know, it's just really getting started, and it's looking like it's a lot of promise and opportunity over there. So you got people coming from all across the world, and the business owners are welcoming them, Deshaun, because they need the cheap labor. This set up a process of chain migration. Again, make sure that you're listening as you take the notes. Chain migration just simply involves where, when we talk about migration, Stephen, like, people ain't just randomly finna, like, you know, pack up their bags when they live in, like, you know, in China or Korea or Italy. They ain't just finna pack up their bags like, let me move on to America. They're gonna, like, you know, go after, like, so the way it will work would be their cousin might go, their brother might go, and like, hey, Steve, it's on and popping here in New York, dog. It's all types of jobs. You come over here, man, you get work. I know you're struggling over there. Yeah, you come through, boom, boom, boom. You can stay with me for a few months. I help you get set up till you find a job, you know, and then we call some more people over. So chain migration, again, like, it's a chain. There's a link on the chain, right? So one person pull another person over, then they pull some more family members over, then they pull up some more family members over. So it's very rare where people are just coming isolation, knowing nobody. This is true, Deshaun, whether we're talking about chain migration across the ocean, or migration, the great migration that we'll talk about in a moment, of the Black South going to the Black North. That people wasn't just leaving Georgia to go up to Detroit, you know, randomly. Like, they had a cousin, a brother, uncle, sister that was up there first, and then they went. And that's how my people got up there. My uncle Robert Lee came from Alabama. He was the first one. He told my daddy, like, hey, it's only popping up here in the shy, it's cold as hell, but, you know, it's a lot of jobs, a lot of activity. They don't call you nigger quite as much. They still don't call you nigger, of course, but they might not do it quite as much. And we got areas where, for the most part, we ain't got to be bothered with, with them cats as much. Come on through. And many Black people did. Amazing numbers of Black people did. Again, your Black populations in places like Detroit, St. Louis, Philadelphia, DC, Cleveland, Chicago, LA. All this started with this. There was Black people there before, don't get me wrong, there was some, but like not at this level. As you can imagine, Stephen, the good white folks up there were more than happy to see them, right? Not so much. So it quickly became an issue, Deshaun, of where's we finna have all these cats live? We need their labor. We need their cheap labor. We can pay the Black workers, Stephen. We can pay them even less than some of the Italian and the Irish. Do your own research on that, but that's true. And keep in mind this pattern, right? Because when we talk about immigration to the United States, what is the main discussion involving this today? Where, where's much of the concern about where most of the immigration is coming from today in 2021?
Mexico.
Yes. So it's really important that we understand these patterns historically. That in addition to poor economic conditions in Mexico and other parts of Latin America, there's political and criminal disorder, but also they come in because it's a lot of people here, Stephen, that utilize their labor. They wouldn't be coming if it wasn't for them. We just talked about chain migration, correct, Deshaun? So chain migration is where, one cousin come up, they pull up another, they pull up another, they pull up another. So they're like, hey, we got these jobs at the Hilton. We got these jobs picking fruit for Chiquita. We got these jobs working on this Purdue farm. It don't really pay much. You ain't gonna get no insurance and stuff, but you can make a lot more and you can be safer than you were in Mexico. These were some of the same calculations that Black people made in the early 20th century. You may not get you won't get lynched as much up there. You can make, again, you ain't gonna be able to,
Question, Dr. Muhammad.
You give me 1 second, Charles. You won't make great money, but it'll be more money than you could have made sharecropping down in the South. And you can have, be around other Black people from different places that have, similar type mentalities. I'm sorry, Charles.
Oh no, it wasn't really a question. It was more like a comment. But that kind of recently during the spring break, I was staying over at the apartments, and it's kind of crazy how you mentioned basically the Puerto Ricans, because basically, let me say Hispanics. I don't want to be disrespectful, but it was Hispanics were apartment complex, and I was going to ask you, do you still think even with the immigration issues that we still have today, do you still feel like they're still doing that form? I don't want to say it's necessarily racism, but still using immigrants like that, because they know they can pay them less, and they know we have an immigration problem, so they won't really see anything. Do you think we still have that issue?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That issue is going to go on for quite some time, and unfortunately, as we see here, Charles, that even if it stops being Hispanics, there'll be some other group. The whole name of the game, and how can I say? This is a rational calculation of business owners. They want to find as cheap a labor as possible. If you owned your own business, right?
Right.
The biggest expense for a company is what they have to pay their workers. So there are always efforts made to get as much work with as little expense as possible. Now, I believe that there's a certain limit to that there are certain things where, you get what you pay for. And that's why, even the type of work you're doing, right, is going to be specialized. It's not just wage labor. the work that you all are training yourselves to do, and why I really like, again, often get confused in some of your behaviors at times, is that you are selling your knowledge and expertise in the workplace. You're selling that, hey, I'm bringing some things different to the marketplace that are not easily replaceable. Because these workers here, right, when you're working in factory work and you're doing wage work, a lot of times it's work where you can be easily replaced. And work like that, you can be paid less. And like I said, you're more dispensable. So even more than the racism, I won't say more than the racism, because I'm not sure that these kind of things will be happening to white immigrant workers. But a lot of it is just the economics and capitalism of it. Because as we saw before, they did do this to white, quote unquote, white workers initially. For the most part, and I won't get too deep into this, our whole notion of white didn't even exist at this point. Like, white people didn't see themselves as white. They saw themselves as Irish, German, Polish, Dutch, etc. And when these Italians and Irish people came over, it was other quote unquote white people in the 1800s. So it was like, why the hell is these goddamn dirty Irishmen coming over here? Do your own research, but that's the truth. So economics has always played a role, and these patterns are important, right? Because it's good that you make that observation, Charles, but there are some Black people who live today that don't make those connections to see, like, hey, the same patterns that Black people experienced back in the 1910s to 1940 are the same things that Mexican immigrants, that Hispanic immigrants experience today. So European immigration begins to decline, especially like, through quotas and laws and stuff like, so especially after World War I, they were very targeted about, what immigrants could come over to the United States. But the Great Migration, which again involved the migration of Black people, the children of former slaves, migrating to the great northern centers that we know today in Detroit, Philly, DC, New York, Chicago, St. Louis, Cleveland, Cincinnati, et cetera, et cetera. And there were two factors, right? So agriculturally, so most Black people during that time, most people period were doing agricultural work, but as we talked about, Charles, through the Industrial Revolution, it wasn't as profitable anymore to do farming work. So they came up to the cities to, find work there. And it was like, okay, where are they finna live? And the urban planners pushed these Black people into the deepest corners of these cities, which would develop into ghettos, which we know, of course, are exclusively inhabited by members of one group. And for the most part, Stephen, they didn't have a choice in where they were gonna live. So the South Side of Chicago today, is still like, very Black by itself, like one of the blackest cities, like, in the country, just the South Side. But that didn't just happen by accident. Like, people were pushed out. So again, we talked about the concentric zone in earlier chapters on the Chicago School. So you got that central business district that was in the center of Chicago. They pushed the Black people further and further away from that district. And in some of those areas, ghettos formed. There were some areas where enclaves formed. Bronzeville, one of the more prominent. And the white populations were displaced to suburban areas. Ironically, and we'll talk about this next month when we get to the chapter on the suburbanization of America, in places like Chicago, but in places really all over the country, you're seeing a reverse of this today in 2021. The suburbs of Chicago are becoming a lot more Blacker. And you got a lot more white folks moving into areas, Stephen, they used to call ghettos. It's so strange. It's just so strange. Well, oftentimes, Sean, like I've been home several times and I've been in an area that like used to be the hood. And I look around, it's like, white people jogging and biking. What? Like totally blowing my mind. Like I said, would have been unthinkable like 20 years ago. Like, wouldn't even think about coming anywhere near here. This ain't just Chicago. This is Atlanta. This is Dallas. This is New York. This is DC. But more and more of these things are happening. It's really, and this is important, right? Because again, you all are going to go into the market, you're going to find a place to live. And a lot of times, Deshaun, we're told that the places that we live don't have value, that they're ghetto places and stuff like that. The ghetto comes oftentimes from what's in the neighborhood and the community. But oftentimes, this is really valuable property that we be sitting on. It's really important, no matter where you live, that you understand that. When cities first formed, where did they form near? Like geographically?
Near rivers, right? And waters.
Absolutely. So in cities today, what do you think is some of the best properties? Most highly valued?
Waterfront properties.
Yep. Do your own research on that, but I could be making out. Like, so in Chicago, which is on Lake Michigan, that's really valuable property. There was a lot of ghettos and hoods that was littered around there that they said the property value was so low. Not nowadays. New Orleans. It is believed, Stephen, that New Orleans, things were allowed to happen in New Orleans in particular to displace a lot of really, really poor people and take some land that was really valuable. You look into that on your own and do your own research, but like, I would really encourage you to kind of study these things as you all live and work in big cities of your own as you go through your development. Keep in mind, Deshaun, that these things could not happen without laws. We talked about urban planning, so the politicians played a role in constructing ghettos, where white people, again, got welfare housing. Again, we think about welfare and stuff, and we think about that as being a black thing. No, those things were constructed to help poor white people. Do your own research, I could be making it up, but I am not. They provided some funds for urban housing. Again, we got all these people coming in a short amount of time. Where are they going to live? So they provided some planning and even developed some urban renewal programs. But oftentimes, Stephen, these made the conditions of the ghetto even worse. A couple more points before I go on, before we close for the day. So assimilation, right, is where, again, you get all these different groups, Deshaun, coming to these new places, particularly coming from foreign countries. Think about this again with, like, Mexican Americans, that, one of the complaints is that we want Mexican Americans to assimilate. Assimilate means don't be speaking no Spanish, man. You need to speak English here. Assimilate means that the culture and norms that you may have had there, you can no longer practice here. This has been demanded of almost every group that's come to America. Italians that, again, are speaking a foreign language. They might have goats and stuff sitting in their front yard in a crowded Philadelphia street. And people are like, dude, why you got this goat out here, man? This stuff stinks. Like, this is what we do. What you talking about? Hey, I don't know how y'all do it there. In Philly, all these people around, man, I can smell this goat in my house 5 blocks down. You got to do something with this. Stuff like that, for example, the laws make it where you can't be having live animals and stuff in those small spaces and things. But when you're coming from those new, traditional agriculture-based cultures, you're not aware of that. But you're expected very quickly to assimilate and become more American and less Italian. Now, if you were Irish or Polish, Deshaun, that was a lot easier for you to just become a white American. But if you're Deshaun's complexion, it's a little bit more difficult to assimilate and blend on in. So again, right, people would have discriminated against your grandfather for being Irish, but you speak and talk and behave like a quote unquote normal American, because that's all you know. So you don't face that same level of discrimination. But Deshaun, people gonna look at you in 1920 and they're gonna be able to discern that your granddaddy's a slave. And those things really carry a lot of weight. And quite frankly, they still carry a lot of weight to 2021. We'll talk about that in other sociology classes. But the main thing that is involved here, again, a couple quick things before we close, that you have to almost forego your cultural identity, Stephen, and identify with the dominant group. As it relates to this, Charles, I hope that this is something that you as young Black men, I hope this is something that you never do. Now, I want you to take part and get full advantages of all the benefits of American society. But I don't want y'all assimilating, man. I want you, Stephen, to be your authentic Black self your whole entire life. Because if we're going to really have a diverse society, diversity means that we actually have to celebrate difference. It doesn't mean that we all become one type of people. That's very boring and lame. And we talk about segregation, right? Because what we're seeing here, Stephen, are the cities are becoming very segregated. The cities themselves are becoming segregated. And even though you get all these different types of people there, Irish, Chinese folks, Jews, Polish people, Middle Eastern folks, Indians, Black people from the Caribbean, Black people from Africa, Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, Dominicans. But much like they had in the South, Charles, that they was coming from, many would come up where the Black people were coming from. Many people would come up north and experience similar levels of segregation that they found down south. This made it where by the 1950s and 60s, Chicago was more segregated than Birmingham, Alabama, statistically speaking. And this segregation came in 5 forms. We'll close on this note and begin with this on Wednesday in looking at how some areas went beyond just normal segregation and experienced what we call hypersegregation. This makes it where, Charles, you're almost totally isolated from the rest of society. That you live in a hood in Detroit, and it's almost like the whole rest of the world don't exist. That your whole experience is confined to like 2 or 3 blocks in this big, wonderful city that you live in. That is, again, that's not only by choice, that's been by the design of urban and federal planners. We'll talk about that on Wednesday. As always, this lecture will be recorded. Make sure that you stay on point and preparing for the pop quizzes that may be coming. And get started on the second writing assignment.
Yes, sir.
Have a good one. I'll see y'all on Wednesday.